While she danced with him at the family wedding, I handed her ring to her sister and walked out. That 30-second decision destroyed my marriage, but saved my life. What I discovered next about my wife's business meetings would shock you. She wasn't just cheating, she was stealing everything. My name is Gareth Dunlap. I'm 42 years old, and I own Dunlap Heavy Duty Auto, the only truck repair shop in Cedar Falls that'll work on the big rigs at 3 in the morning when some poor bastard breaks down on the interstate. Built that business from nothing with these 2 hands and a whole lot of stubbornness. It's been my life for 15 years, right up until my world decided to fall apart. I met Lorraine 5 years ago at a diner off Route 9. She was waitressing there, trying to make ends meet after her divorce, raising her daughter Mila all by herself. Mila was 10 then, scared, angry at the world, missing her deadbeat father who'd vanished like smoke in the wind. Lorraine had these tired eyes that lit up when she smiled, and something about her just grabbed hold of me and wouldn't let go. I fell hard and fast, not just for Lorraine, but for both of them. Mila needed a father figure, and I needed a family. We moved in together after 8 months, got married a year later. Best decision I ever made, or so I thought. Mila took to calling me dad within 6 months. That little girl wrapped me around her finger faster than a hydraulic jack lifts a truck. We'd work on small engines together in the garage, lawn mowers, go-karts, anything with moving parts. She had natural talent, could spot a problem just by listening to how an engine ran. Made me proud as punch. Lorraine seemed happy too. She quit waitressing and started handling the books for the shop. Said she wanted to be part of what I'd built, wanted to help make it grow. She was good with numbers, better than me anyway. Within 2 years, our revenue jumped 30%. But looking back now, I can pinpoint exactly when things started to shift. It was subtle at first. The way she'd tense up when I'd come home early, how she'd angle her phone away when texting. Little things that didn't mean much on their own, but added up to something I didn't want to acknowledge. The first real red flag came last winter. Lorraine started talking about this new client she'd been working with, some hotshot business consultant named Otis Blackwood, who specialized in optimizing small business operations. She'd mention him constantly. Otis says we should restructure our debt. Otis thinks we need better inventory management. Otis has some really innovative ideas about expansion. I should have paid attention to how her voice changed when she said his name. Should have noticed how she started dressing nicer on the days she had meetings with him. Should have questioned why a successful consultant was spending so much time on a small-town truck repair shop. But I trusted her. Trusted them both. And that trust is exactly what nearly destroyed everything I'd spent my whole life building. The morning everything started to unravel began like any other Tuesday in March. I was under the hood of a Peterbilt, wrestling with a blown head gasket, when Lorraine walked into the shop wearing that new dress. The navy blue one with a belt that cost more than most people spend on groceries in a month. "Gareth," she called out, her voice carrying that careful tone she'd been using lately. "I'm heading to the meeting with Otis. We're going over the quarterly projections." I wiped my hands on a rag and looked up. "Another meeting? Didn't you just see him yesterday?" Lorraine's smile flickered for just a second. "This is important business, honey. Otis thinks we could double our revenue if we implement his suggestions properly." "What kind of suggestions?" I asked, stepping closer. Because last I checked, we were doing just fine without some fancy consultant telling us how to run our business. "He's not just some consultant, Gareth." Her voice got that defensive edge. "He has an MBA from Northwestern. He's worked with companies 10 times our size." I studied her face, looking for something I couldn't name. "Then what's he doing in Cedar Falls working with a truck repair shop?" "He's between larger projects. This is more of a favor." She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. "I'll be back around 3. That's when I noticed it. The perfume. Lorraine never wore perfume to business meetings. Hell, she barely wore it to church on Sundays. But there she was, smelling like she was going on a date instead of discussing inventory management. After she left, I tried to focus on the Peterbilt, but my mind kept wandering. I called my buddy Jake, who runs the auto parts store downtown. "Jake, you know anything about this Otis Blackwood character?" I asked. "Blackwood? Yeah, I've seen him around. Drives that black BMW, always wearing those expensive suits. Word is he's been spending a lot of time at Murphy's bar lately." "Murphy's? That'd make sense." Lorraine had said their meetings were at his office. "Yeah, strange thing though," Jake continued. "I was there last Friday around lunch, and I could have sworn I saw him having drinks with your Lorraine. Looked pretty cozy from where I was sitting. My stomach dropped like a stone. You sure it was her? Pretty sure. She was wearing that red coat she always wears to the bank. I hung up and stared at the Peterbilt's engine, but I wasn't seeing pistons and valves anymore. I was seeing my wife's new clothes, her extra attention to makeup, the way she'd started locking her phone. That afternoon, I did something I'd never done before. I drove past Blackwood's office building. His BMW was in the parking lot, but Lorraine's Honda was nowhere to be seen. I circled the block twice, then headed to Murphy's bar. Sure enough, there they were in a corner booth. Lorraine was leaning forward, laughing at something he'd said, her hand resting on the table, dangerously close to his. Blackwood was this smooth-looking guy, probably mid-40s, with silver hair and the kind of smile that probably worked on a lot of women. I sat in my truck across the street for 10 minutes, watching them. Watching my wife act like a woman I didn't recognize. When she reached over and touched his hand, I started the engine and drove home. I didn't confront her that night. Maybe I should have. Instead, I waited, watched, and let the suspicion eat at me like acid. The next few weeks, I started paying closer attention to everything. Lorraine's schedule, her phone habits, the way she dressed for these so-called business meetings. But it was Mila who delivered the knockout punch. I was in the garage teaching her how to change transmission fluid on a '98 Ford when she looked up at me with those serious brown eyes that reminded me so much of her mother. "Dad, can I ask you something?" Mila said, wiping grease off her hands. "Shoot, kiddo. Is Mom having an affair?" The wrench slipped from my hand and clattered to the concrete floor. "What makes you ask that?" Mila glanced toward the house, then back at me. "I heard her on the phone last night. She was in the laundry room, talking really quiet. She kept saying stuff like, 'I can't wait to see you,' and 'he doesn't suspect anything.'" My chest tightened. "You sure that's what you heard?" "Yeah." And when she saw me standing there, she hung up real quick and said it was Aunt Sarah. "But Aunt Sarah's been dead for 3 years, Dad." Smart girl. Too smart for her own good sometimes. "There's more," Mila continued. "Yesterday after school, I saw Mom at the mall with some guy. They were holding hands and kissing by the fountain. Not like friend kissing, like, you know." I sat down hard on a milk crate, feeling like I'd been sucker punched. What did this guy look like? Tall, silver hair, expensive clothes. He was driving a black BMW. Otis Blackwood. My wife was cheating on me with Otis Blackwood, and my 15-year-old stepdaughter had to be the one to connect the dots. "Dad." Mila's voice was small now. "Are you and Mom going to get divorced?" I looked at this girl who'd called me Dad for 5 years, who trusted me to fix broken things and make sense of a confusing world. How do you tell a kid that sometimes the people you love most are the ones who hurt you deepest? "I don't know, sweetheart," I said honestly. "But whatever happens, you and me, we're solid. You understand?" She nodded, but I could see the fear in her eyes. She'd already lost one father. Now she was watching her world fall apart again. That night, I waited up for Lorraine. She came home at 11:30, claiming she'd been working late on the books. But her lipstick was gone, her hair was mussed, and she smelled like men's cologne. "How was your evening?" I asked from the kitchen table. "Fine," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Just boring number crunching." "Funny thing," I said, standing up slowly. "Jake saw you at the mall today. With Otis." The color drained from her face. For a moment, she looked like she might confess everything. Then that familiar defiance kicked in. "Jake's mistaken," she said coldly. "I was here all afternoon." "Lorraine," I said, my voice steady but hard. "Our daughter saw you too." Her mask finally slipped. "It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is." But she just turned and walked away, leaving me standing in our kitchen, wondering how long I'd been living with a stranger. 2 weeks later, Lorraine's sister Rebecca invited us to her annual Memorial Day barbecue. Under normal circumstances, I would have found an excuse not to go. Rebecca's parties were always full of people trying to impress each other with stories about their latest vacations or home renovations. But this year, I had a feeling Otis Blackwood might show up. I was right. He arrived fashionably late, carrying a bottle of wine that probably cost more than most people's car payments. Rebecca introduced him as her business associate, who was helping optimize the efficiency of local enterprises. The man had a gift for making everything sound important and complicated. Lorraine was grilling burgers when he walked into the backyard. I watched her face light up like Christmas morning, then quickly compose itself when she remembered where she was. But I'd seen enough. Gareth, Rebecca called out. Come meet Otis. He's the consultant I was telling you about. I walked over and shook his hand, gripping it just hard enough to let him know I wasn't some soft suburban dad. So you're the famous Otis Blackwood. Guilty as charged, he said with that practiced smile. Your wife speaks very highly of you. I bet she does, I replied, looking him straight in the eye. Tells me all kinds of interesting things about you too. For just a second, his smile faltered. Good. Let him sweat. The afternoon dragged on with forced conversation and fake smiles. I watched Lorraine and Otis carefully avoid each other, while somehow always ending up in the same conversations. They'd perfected this little dance. Eye contact across the yard, subtle touches when passing plates, inside jokes that made everyone else feel excluded. But it was the last dance of the evening that finally broke me. Rebecca had set up a speaker system on the deck, playing some romantic ballad while couples swayed together under the string lights. I was helping clean up the grill when I looked over and saw them. Lorraine was in Otis's arms, moving slowly to the music like they'd done this 1,000 times before. Her hand was on the back of his neck, her fingers playing with his collar. He was whispering something in her ear that made her laugh, that genuine, unguarded laugh I hadn't heard in months. They looked like lovers, not like a married woman and her business consultant, but like two people who belonged together. I walked over to the table where Rebecca was sitting with her husband, opened Lorraine's purse, and pulled out the diamond ring I'd saved for 2 years to buy her. Rebecca's eyes went wide. Tell my wife, I said, placing the ring in Rebecca's palm, that while she was dancing with him, I handed her ring to her sister and walked out. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't look back at the dance floor. I just walked to my truck and drove away, leaving behind 5 years of marriage and a family I thought was real. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I drove to my parents' house on the other side of town. Floyd and Bernice Dunlap had been married for 43 years, and seeing their porch light on at 10:30 at night felt like coming back to solid ground after floating in space. Gareth. Mom opened the door in her bathrobe, immediately reading the storm clouds on my face. What's wrong, son? Lorraine's cheating on me, I said, the words tasting like gravel in my mouth. Dad appeared behind her, still dressed from watching his evening news. Come on in, boy. Let's talk. We sat in their kitchen, the same kitchen where they taught me that marriage was sacred, that family came first, that a man's word and his commitment meant everything. Now I had to tell them their hopes for grandchildren from this marriage were dead in the water. How long have you known? Dad asked, his weathered hands wrapped around a coffee mug. Suspected for weeks. Confirmed tonight. I told them about the business consultant, the lies, the dance I'd witnessed. Mila figured it out before I did. Mom's face went pale. That poor girl. She's been through enough. She's tougher than all of us, I said. But yeah, this is gonna mess her up. What are you going to do? Dad asked. I don't know. Everything we built together, the house, the business, Mila's college fund, it's all tangled up. And there's something else. I took a deep breath. I think Blackwood might be after more than just my wife. I explained my suspicions about the business restructuring, the debt consolidation Lorraine had been pushing, the way Blackwood seemed to know too much about her finances. Son, Dad said slowly, you need to protect yourself. Get to a lawyer first thing Monday morning. When I finally went home Sunday evening, Lorraine was waiting in the living room like she'd been rehearsing. Her face was composed, but I could see the calculation behind her eyes. We need to talk, she said. Yeah, we do. I sat down across from her, keeping my distance. Start with why you're destroying our family for a con man. He's not a con man, she snapped, then caught herself. Gareth, what we had, it wasn't working anymore. So you decided to fix it by sleeping with someone else. I never meant for it to happen. Otis understands me in ways you never could. Understands you. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. He understands your bank account numbers, Lorraine. He understands business assets and property deeds. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Because I've been doing some research of my own. Your boyfriend's been married 3 times. Each marriage ended with the wife losing her business or her family money. He's a predator, Lorraine. She stood up, anger flashing in her eyes. You're just jealous because he can offer me things you never could. Like what? A criminal record? Because that's where this is heading. He loves me, she said, but her voice wavered. He loves what you can give him. The minute he bleeds you dry, he'll disappear. That's when Mila appeared in the doorway. Mom, is it true? Are you really leaving us for that creep? Lorraine looked at her daughter, really looked at her, and for a moment, I thought she might snap out of whatever spell Blackwood had cast. Then her face hardened. Mila, this is between adults. I am an adult. Mila shot back. And I'm telling you that man is bad news. Dad sees it. I see it. Even Grandma Bernice sees it. Why can't you? But Lorraine had already made her choice. Monday morning brought a wake-up call that hit, like a sledgehammer to the gut. I was opening the shop when my business banker, Tom Wright, called with panic in his voice. Gareth, I need to get down here right away. Someone's been making moves on your business accounts. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in Tom's office staring at paperwork that made my blood boil. Lorraine had used her power of attorney to secure a massive business loan against the shop's assets. The money, nearly $200,000, had been transferred to an investment account managed by Blackwood's consulting firm. When did this happen? I asked, my hands shaking with rage. Friday afternoon. Your wife presented all the proper documentation, said it was for expansion and modernization. Friday, the day after the barbecue. While I'd been reeling from their public display, they'd been moving our money. Can we stop this? Tom shook his head grimly. Not without her signature or a court order. Technically, she had legal authority to make these transactions. I drove straight to the shop, where I found 3 customers waiting for their trucks and no sign of Lorraine. When I called her cell, it went straight to voicemail. Same with the office line. That's when Jake from the parts store showed up with more bad news. Gareth, I hate to pile on, but I need to collect on that outstanding invoice. My supplier's breathing down my neck. What outstanding invoice? The one your wife authorized last month. $12,000 in specialty parts for the Hendricks fleet work. I pulled up our books on the computer. There was no Hendricks fleet work, no specialty parts order, but there was a $12,000 charge to our account. My phone rang. It was Bill Hendricks himself. Gareth, I've been trying to reach your wife. We need to discuss the delays on our truck maintenance contract. What delays, Bill? Well, we prepaid for 6 months of service, but none of our trucks have been scheduled yet. Lorraine said you were backed up, but it's been 8 weeks. Another missing chunk of money. Another lie. I was starting to see the scope of what they'd done to me. By noon, I discovered that nearly every major account had been either raided or compromised. Parts ordered but never delivered. Services paid for but never performed. Cash deposits that had mysteriously vanished from our operating account. Lorraine and Blackwood hadn't just stolen my money. They'd systematically destroyed my business reputation in the process. I was sitting in the ruins of everything I'd built when Mila walked into the shop after school. She took one look at my face and knew. How bad is it, Dad? Bad, I admitted. They cleaned us out. She sat down on the workbench beside me, this 15-year-old girl showing more strength than her mother ever had. What do we do now? I looked around the shop, at the tools I'd collected over 15 years, at the bays where I'd built my reputation, one satisfied customer at a time, at the office where I'd dreamed of expanding this business to leave something for the family I thought I had. We fight back, I said. We fight back hard. That afternoon, I did 3 things. First, I called the best divorce lawyer in the county. Second, I filed a police report for embezzlement and fraud. Third, I changed every lock in the house and the shop. Lorraine had made her choice. Now she could live with the consequences. 3 weeks into the legal battle, when the lawyer bills were piling up and the stress was eating me alive, she walked back into my life like a ghost from another lifetime. Yvonne Voss. I was at Murphy's bar, nursing my second bourbon and trying to forget that my business was hemorrhaging money, when I heard that familiar laugh from across the room. 22 years melted away in an instant. There she was, still beautiful at 40, still carrying herself with that confidence that had captivated me in high school. Gareth Dunlap, she said, sliding into the booth across from me. I heard you were having some troubles. Word travels fast in a small town. I replied, studying her face. What brings you back to Cedar Falls, Yvonne? My mother's funeral was last month. I'm settling her estate. She paused, her green eyes softening. I also heard about Lorraine. I'm sorry. Are you? The bourbon was making me bold. Because if I remember correctly, you predicted this exact scenario 20 years ago. She'd been right, too. The night before I left for college, she'd begged me to take her with me. Said we belonged together, that we could make it work anywhere. But I'd been young and stupid, convinced I needed to experience the world before settling down. I was 18 and jealous, she said. I didn't want to lose you to some college girl. Instead, you lost me to pride and bad timing. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of what might have been hanging between us like smoke. I'm divorced now, she said quietly. Has been for 3 years. Turned out my ex-husband was more interested in my inheritance than in me. Seems to be a theme in my life lately. Yvonne reached across the table and touched my hand. Gareth, I know this is complicated, but I never stopped caring about you. When I heard what happened, I had to come see if you were okay. The touch of her skin sent electricity up my arm, but alarm bells were ringing in my head. The timing was too perfect, too convenient. How exactly did you hear about my situation? I asked, pulling my hand back. Small town gossip, she said, but something flickered in her eyes. You know how people talk. That night, after Yvonne left with a promise to call me tomorrow, I did some checking. What I found made my stomach turn. Yvonne's mother had died 18 months ago, not last month. The estate had been settled a year ago, and according to her social media posts, she'd been living in Cedar Falls for 6 months, which meant she'd been here during my entire marriage collapse and had only approached me after the news of my financial troubles became public. I called my lawyer first thing in the morning. Sandra, I need you to run a background check on someone. Yvonne Voss. Any particular reason? Call a hunch. But I'm starting to think my problems are bigger than one cheating wife and a con man. The background check on Yvonne came back 3 days later, and it was worse than I'd feared. She wasn't just some lonely ex-girlfriend looking for comfort. She was a professional grifter with a rap sheet spanning 3 states. Insurance fraud in Nevada, Sandra read from her notes. Identity theft in Colorado. Marriage fraud in Texas. She specializes in targeting recently divorced men with significant assets. I felt sick. How did she know about my situation so precisely? That's the interesting part. She's been in communication with Otis Blackwood for months. Phone records show regular contact. They've been working together. The whole thing was an elaborate setup. Lorraine seduces the mark, creates the crisis. Then Yvonne swoops in as the sympathetic savior to finish the job. There's more, Sandra continued. She's been asking around town about your family's property holdings. Your parents own a lot of valuable land, don't they? My blood turned to ice. Mom and Dad's farm was worth close to $2 million. Prime development land that had been in our family for 3 generations. I need to warn them, I said, already reaching for my truck keys. But when I got to my parents' house, Yvonne's car was already in the driveway. I found them all sitting in the kitchen, Yvonne charming my parents with stories about her successful consulting business and how she wanted to help Gareth through this difficult time. There's my boy, Dad said when I walked in. Yvonne was just telling us about some investment opportunities that might help you rebuild. Investment opportunities? I kept my voice level, but my eyes were locked on Yvonne. Land development, she said smoothly. There's a company looking to build a shopping complex. They're offering top dollar for the right properties. Mom looked confused. But we're not selling the farm. Of course not, Yvonne said quickly. But you could leverage the equity. Use it as collateral for Gareth's business expansion. Help him get back on his feet. I'd heard enough. Mom, Dad, could you give us a minute? Yvonne and I need to discuss some private matters. After my parents left the room, I pulled out my phone and showed Yvonne the background check results. Interesting reading, I said quietly. Her mask slipped for just a second. Then that practiced smile returned. Gareth, you're obviously under a lot of stress, Dash. Cut the act, Yvonne. I know you're working with Blackwood. I know this whole thing was planned. She stood up slowly, her green eyes going cold. You can't prove anything. I can prove enough to have you arrested for fraud and conspiracy. And what about your parents? Such sweet people. It would be a shame if something happened to their beautiful farm. The threat was subtle but clear. I stepped closer, letting her see the steel in my eyes. Listen carefully, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You're going to walk out of here and disappear. If I see you again, if you contact my family again, if you so much as drive past this house, I'll make sure you spend the next 10 years in a federal prison. Are we clear? For the first time since she'd walked back into my life, Yvonne looked genuinely afraid. Crystal clear, she said. After she left, I sat my parents down and explained everything. The betrayal, the conspiracy, how close they'd come to losing their farm. How could we have been so blind? Mom asked. Because you're good people who see the best in others, I replied. That's not a flaw. It's what makes you who you are. But from now on, we're going to be a lot more careful about who we trust. The trial of Lorraine Dunlap and Otis Blackwood lasted 2 weeks. I sat in that courtroom every day, watching my ex-wife try to explain away 5 years of lies and theft. Her lawyer painted her as a victim of manipulation, a lonely housewife seduced by a charming con man. I wasn't buying it, and neither was the jury. Mr. Dunlap, the prosecutor said when I took the stand, can you describe the financial impact of the defendant's actions on your business? They destroyed 15 years of work, I replied, looking directly at Lorraine. They didn't just steal money, they stole trust. Customers who'd done business with me for decades started questioning whether I was honest. Suppliers demanded cash up front. I nearly lost everything. And what about the personal impact? I glanced at Mila in the gallery. She'd insisted on coming, said she wanted to see justice done. They tried to destroy my family. My stepdaughter lost her college fund. My parents almost lost their farm. And a 16-year-old girl had to choose between her mother and the only stable home she'd ever known. During cross-examination, Lorraine's lawyer tried to paint me as controlling and suspicious. Isn't it true, Mr. Dunlap, that you spied on my client? That you followed her and invaded her privacy? Sir, when someone is stealing your life savings, keeping tabs on them isn't spying, it's self-defense. The courtroom chuckled, and I saw the jury nodding in agreement. Otis Blackwood got 12 years. Lorraine got 6, with the possibility of parole and 4 if she made full restitution. The judge ordered them to repay every stolen dollar, plus damages. This court finds that the defendants engaged in a deliberate, calculated scheme to defraud Mr. Dunlap of his life's work, Judge Harrison said. The betrayal of trust by a spouse makes these crimes particularly heinous. After the sentencing, Mila and I walked out of that courthouse together. She'd officially changed her name to Mila Dunlap the week before, said she wanted nothing connecting her to her mother's crimes. How do you feel, Dad? She asked as we reached my truck. Like I can finally breathe again. The business was slowly recovering. Word had gotten out about what really happened, and customers started coming back. Some even apologized for doubting me. But the real victory was sitting beside me in that truck, a 16-year-old girl who'd chosen loyalty over blood. Dad, Mila said as we drove home, I got accepted to State University. Full scholarship. Kiddo, that's fantastic. What did you find out? Yesterday. I wanted to wait until after the trial to tell you. I pulled over and hugged her tight. Despite everything Lorraine had done, despite all the pain and chaos, this girl had thrived. She was stronger than both her parents combined. I'm proud of you, I said. I learned from the best. 5 years later, I stood in the garage teaching my grandson how to change oil on a 2010 Silverado. Yeah, you heard that right, grandson. Mila had gotten married right after college graduation to a good man named Derek, who worked for the county road department. Their son, little Gareth, was 3 years old and already fascinated by anything with an engine. Careful with that wrench, buddy, I told him as he tried to help tighten the drain plug. It's all about the feel, not the force. The shop was busier than ever. Word spreads fast in small towns, and apparently, surviving a high-profile fraud case makes people trust your character. We'd expanded into 2 more bays and hired 3 full-time mechanics. Grandpa, little Gareth said, his face serious under his tiny work cap, why did Mila's first mommy go to jail? I glanced at Mila, who was handling the books at the office desk. She nodded, giving me permission to answer honestly. Because she made bad choices, buddy. She chose money over family, lies over truth. And when you make choices like that, there are consequences. But Mila chose you instead. That's right. And that choice made all the difference. My parents were doing well. Dad had finally retired from farming, but he came by the shop most days to supervise and tell stories to the customers. Mom had turned into the world's most devoted great-grandmother, spoiling little Gareth rotten. The farm stayed in the family. We'd added it to a conservation trust to make sure no future con artists could ever threaten it again. As for Lorraine, she was released after serving 3.5 years. She'd written letters to Mila from prison, apologies, explanations, pleas for forgiveness. Mila read them all, but never responded. I don't hate her, Mila had told me one day, but I don't trust her either. And without trust, we don't have anything. Smart girl. Always had been. She was 21 when she graduated college, 22 when she married Derek. Old enough to make her own choices about who belonged in her life. Otis Blackwood was still in federal prison. Last I heard, he was serving his time in a medium security facility in Ohio, running the prison library. Apparently, even con men could find redemption if they looked hard enough. That evening, after closing up the shop, I sat on my back porch with a beer and watched little Gareth play in the yard. Mila and Derek were talking about buying a house closer to town. But for now, 3 generations of Dunlaps lived under one roof, and it felt right. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I'm sorry for everything. I hope you can forgive me someday. L. I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Some bridges, once burned, aren't worth rebuilding. The sun was setting over Cedar Falls, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. In the distance, I could hear the rumble of 18-wheelers on the interstate, trucks that might need fixing, drivers who deserved honest work at fair prices. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new customers, new opportunities to build something lasting. But tonight, I was exactly where I belonged, surrounded by family that chose to be here, in a business built on integrity, in a town that had seen me at my worst and stood by me anyway. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. Sometimes it's just living well.